It's a crossover Wednesday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast as Jon Chik of Locked On New York Rangers is here to discuss a multitude of topics, including Nick Bonino signing with the Rangers during free agency, the Penguins-Rangers rivalry as we know it right now, plus reliving some of the glory days when Nick Bonino was a member of the Penguins. Please note that Patrick Damp is not on this episode. He had some work-related things come up, but he will be on the next episode on Friday when we discuss the new Drew O'Connor contract and what that means going forward. Remember, the Penguins have a second buyout window that now opens on Saturday. We'll go through Monday. Overall, really like that O'Connor deal. Falls in line for what I predicted, $900K to $1 million. He gets $925,000 per season. So really like that deal for a player who I think can provide some offensive oomph to the bottom six. But Pat and I will have more details on that for the Friday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. But until then, here is today's episode with Jon Chik of Locked On New York Rangers.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back, Rangers fans and Penguins fans. Like I said, we got a very special crossover edition here today. This is Jon Chik with Locked On New York Rangers, joined here by my good friend Hunter Hodes of Locked On Pittsburgh Penguins for, once again, a very fun-filled crossover edition here. And Hunter, we might as well just jump right into it here. Obviously, Nick Bonino, now 35 years old, and he went back to the Penguins for the second time this past season, only played 3 games there. When he really made his mark with your team, though, was obviously the 2 Stanley Cups that they won while he was there. And, for Bonino, somebody that obviously is not, known as a superstar player or anything along those lines, but has a reputation just being a gritty, hardworking, tone-setting kind of player, good defensive forward, penalty killing, the whole 9 yards. I mean, does that sound about right? Is that basically Bonino in a nutshell? Would you go along with that assessment there?
Definitely at this point in his career, John, I remember I was decently excited when they got him for a second time at the trade deadline. I was like, oh, well, more help for the bottom six, especially defensively. But then he only plays 3 games, gets hurt, and then misses the rest of the season. Very unfortunate with the injury that he had, but he can still play really well in the defensive zone. This past season, ranked in the 84th percentile for 5-on-5 defensive impact. Overall, defensively, ranked in the 93rd percentile for 5-on-5 defense, and can also kill you penalties, ranks in the 82nd percentile for penalty kill for bottom 6 forward. So if you need him to kill penalties, if you need him to go out there in a big-time situation to close down a lead, I think he can definitely do that. He's not going to give the Rangers too much offense. He's just not that kind of player anymore where he's going to give you 15 to 17, 18 goals a season, but I think he'll still give you maybe 8 to 10, maybe upwards of 11 to 12 goals a year at this point. He's just, he's in his mid-30s now. He's not the same player that he was back when he was with the Penguins in 2016, 2017, when he could score you a good amount of goals. He can still be a little bit clutch for the Rangers in the playoffs, and maybe we'll get to that a little later on. He's always been a pretty clutch player throughout his career, but overall, especially during the regular season for all 82 games, you're really going to get a good shutdown defensive player who can kill penalties. He can still skate decently well, but not going to give you a lot of offense, at least right now.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds about right. That's kind of the player that I was kind of envisioning for the Rangers, somebody that can just kind of center the fourth line, go out there and work hard and potentially still be a tone-setting player, and somebody that can kill some penalties and, do a lot of the little things to help you win. Hunter, you mentioned a second ago you were excited when the Penguins brought him back via a trade this past season. And then, of course, once again, it doesn't really work out. I mean, he got hurt. There's nothing you can really do about it, but he only played 3 games for the Penguins. When the season ended, did you think the Penguins could bring him back, should bring him back? Did you personally want to see him back? Just any thoughts on Bonino and potentially him sticking around longer than just the 3 games this past season?
It's funny. I didn't really expect any of their pending unrestricted free agents to come back, and then they signed Tristan Jarry when Kyle Dubas took over, funny enough, on July 1, about a month ago. But I never really had a feeling that Bonino was going to come back, only played a few games. Kyle Dubas really has no history with Bonino. He was not the one that acquired him at the trade deadline. That was Ron Hextall and Brian Burke. And for a player who really doesn't bring that much offense, I just don't think it makes any sense for the Penguins at this point, though. It is funny because the players that they did bring into their bottom 6, like a Matt Nieto, a Noah Chari, a Lars Eller. They're all three very good defensive players. So he would have fit the bill there, right? But due to his age, due to him not being maybe as good as some of those other three players in the defensive zone, he's still pretty good, but I think the other players, their numbers are a little bit better. I just don't really think it made that much sense to bring him back. It was really just crowded the forward group even more. I'm more comfortable with the players that they brought into the fold, especially defensively, than Nick Bonino.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I wanted to mention this as well because, I just did a crossover episode with the guys from Locked On Senators, and we were talking about, among other things, Vladimir Tarasenko leaving the Rangers, heading to Ottawa. And, I never really thought that Tarasenko would be anything more than a rental for the Rangers. They just don't have the cap space to be able to afford him. But then there were all these rumors that Tarasenko was going to be going to the Canes. Felt like they were maybe the front runner there. He ends up going to the Senators instead. And that was kind of a relief for me because, well, you know what? At least he's not on a rival team in the Metro. I realize Nick Bonino is not Vladimir Tarasenko. I get that. But from your perspective, I mean, is there any trepidation about, oh man, this guy's on the Rangers now? Could he hurt them in any meaningful way, or does it just bother you personally to see somebody that won cups with the Penguins now going to the rival Rangers?
It may feel a little weird at first, but unless he scores a game-winning goal against them during the regular season, or if these two teams play again in the playoffs, and God forbid if that happens with how the rivalry is right now between these two teams, with how crazy that last series was, I don't think it's going to make me lose sleep at night. Now, if the Rangers sign someone like a Jason Zucker, who just had a career year for the Penguins, I would have definitely been a little bit more worried. He's in Arizona right now. I think he's going to be some trade bait for them. He can potentially go to a contender at the trade deadline. But in terms of Bonino, again, unless he scores a game-winning goal in a high-stakes situation or just saves a goal on the goal line, I'm not really going to be, again, too upset about it. He obviously was a great player with the Penguins for a few years, helped them win 2 Stanley Cups. But hey, players have to go to rivals of teams that they win with sometimes. That's just how it is. And on a 1-year deal worth not even $1 million, I think that's a pretty good bet for him. And I'm curious to see how he does. But no, I'm not really going to get too upset about it. That's for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's funny you mentioned that because, I mean, very few players stick with the same team through their entire career. And a lot of times they'll end up on a rival team. And we're going to talk about the HBK line momentarily here. But I think for me, and maybe for some other Ranger fans as well, the small little silver lining to watching the Penguins win back-to-back cups not too long ago was, well, at least Carl Hagelin got a Stanley Cup or 2 there. So that was kind of nice. He's a pretty popular player when he was here, and late round draft pick, and ended up having quite a nice career for himself. And we'll see what the future holds for him. Obviously, he's had the eye injury, so all the best to Carl Hagelin. But one other thing I wanted to ask about as it pertains to Bonino here. So just personality-wise, and again, we're talking more the first run as opposed to this past season where he only played 3 games with the Penguins. But just how does he go about his business? Is he a rah-rah guy, or is he all business? Does he joke around a little bit? Just kind of give us a feel for, who he is and what kind of personality he brings to the rink.
He's definitely, I think, a good mix. He's definitely serious at times, but he'll also joke around in the locker room. There are numerous videos that have been posted on social media, either from beat reporters or from just the team social media pages, where he just joking around in the locker room with his fellow players, whether it was Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Crystal Tang, Patrick Hornquist, Phil Kessel, Carl Hagelin, Ian Cole, the list goes on and on. But he was also a underrated leader, I thought, for the Penguins during those years. Obviously, you have the core leadership group. Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Crystal Tang, Marc-Andre Fleury was there at the time. Patrick Hornquist was in that next in line for leaders. Ian Cole was there at the time too, before he moved on to play for other teams. But Bonino was right there with them. And when something needed to be said, when the core players didn't want to do it, Bonino was there to do it. So he can be a good voice for the locker room. He can also joke around. Again, he's not a locker room cancer, that's for sure. He is definitely someone that you would want to have in your locker room, especially when it comes to maybe helping out some younger players. I think that could be also a big underrated aspect for him, for the Rangers as well.
I think so too. One of those guys that just kind of has the respect of all his peers around the league. And, he will certainly be one of the veterans on this Ranger team that, has gotten a little bit older. People look at the median age and, oh, the Rangers, they got old. It's like, well, Not really. I mean, the old guys are all there for like 1 year. It's like Bonino and Blake Wheeler and Jonathan Quick. That pulls the average age up quite a bit there. But it is good to know that he can come in and obviously they're not going to make him the captain or anything like that. But just to kind of be that elder statesman and somebody obviously who's done some winning and played in a lot of playoff games. I think it's, for what the price was, it's a solid addition for the Rangers. And Hunter, I definitely want to ask you about the HBK line, which obviously Bonino was a part of for the two most recent Stanley Cup championship runs for the Penguins, and some other things as well. Just how his skill set translates to the playoffs. And we'll get to that in just a second. But first, we do have to let everybody know today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers and Locked On Pittsburgh Penguins is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think will hit the first home run. All on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get up to $200 back in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, and so Hunter and I would just like to thank everybody for making Locked On Rangers and Locked On Penguins your first listen every day. Both shows free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And Hunter, to just kind of go into the time machine here, back into, I guess, the mid-2010s or whatever we want to call it. The Penguins, they win the 2 Stanley Cups there back-to-back. And one of the driving forces for both of those runs, I think especially the first one, but you can elaborate on this more. But it was the HBK line, the third line for the Penguins. It was Carl Hagelin, Nick Bonino, and Phil Kessel, 2 out of 3 of whom have now played for the New York Rangers or are about to play for the New York Ranger. But just talk a little bit about what that line brought to the table and how important were they in those runs for the Penguins, and specifically Bonino, if you could.
It was the biggest X factor for the Penguins in both 2016, 2017, especially 2016, though. You had the Crosby line in 2016, which was blitzing opponents. You had the Evgeny Malkin line, which was also really good. But when Mike Sullivan needed another line to really provide offense, he would send out that third line. And Carl Hagelin, he can be someone that can go forecheck aggressively, use his blazing speed because he's one of the fastest players in the league when he is playing. Hopefully he can come back soon, John. I think we both can say that just because of his eye issue.
Yeah.
Nick Bonino, he was both an offensive good player and a defensive specialist, was very good on faceoffs for the Penguins. Numerous times during those runs, Mike Sullivan would put Bonino out there for big time draws in the defensive zone. Heck, if I actually recall correctly, in Game 7 against the Lightning, he was the one that took the draw with 6.5, I think it was six seconds left to win the game to send the Penguins to the final. Crosby, I believe, was on the ice at this time as well, but that's just how much Sullivan trusted Bonino in that situation. And when you combine that also with Phil Kessel, who is an electric goal scorer still, you have the makings of a line that can just kick everyone's butt. And that's exactly what it did in both runs, especially 2016. Bonino, very clutch player in the playoffs, eliminated the Washington Capitals in Game 6 of that second round series in 2016, also scored the game winner for the Penguins in Game 1 of the Stanley Cup final against the San Jose Sharks, had numerous other goals in the 2017 run to the Stanley Cup. That line in particular was just so good for them. Heck, there's a reason why Shawn Michaels was at Game 5 of the Pens Lightning series. I know they lost that game, but the fact that they brought him there just goes to show how much that line really just went around hockey. I mean, I'm trying to find a better way to say that. I guess went viral around hockey, if that's how you want to say it too, but it was one of the best lines in the league for a couple months, and all 3 players were a big part of it, especially Nick Bonino.
Yeah, it was cool to see Shawn Michaels get involved with that. And for anybody that, might not be familiar with that name, Shawn Michaels, one of the greatest WWE superstars of all time, and was known as the Heartbreak Kid. So the HBK line, Hagelin, Bonino, Kessel, that's where that name comes from. And he actually did end up going to a couple of those Penguin playoff games there. And, to your point, Hunter, they did lose the one that he was at, but he seemed to be having fun with it nevertheless. And something else I wanted to ask about here, and you've kind of already answered this, but Nick Bonino, playoff style hockey, it just feels like it kind of fits his skill set where, he is this gritty player and we know the intensity gets ratcheted up a whole bunch in the playoffs and somebody that can go out there and, again, not like a prolific goal scorer, but you're not shocked when he comes up with a clutch goal. We've seen him do it in the past. Is he somebody that, just in general, his style just fits playoff hockey? I mean, would you agree with that?
I agree with that for sure. He's also a very tough customer. He'll play through a lot of pain in the playoffs. He'll just give you these clutch moments. He did it so many times for the Penguins. Maybe not as much now for the Rangers, considering that he's just older and his offense has kind of left him a little bit. But hey, never say never. Maybe he does give them a clutch goal when the Rangers likely make the playoffs this upcoming season. And I did just want to correct myself a little bit. I believe it was between 6 to 10 seconds left in that Game 7 against Lightning. I don't think it was 6 seconds exactly, but it was in that time frame. But yeah, I mean, again, like anytime you need him for a big draw in a big moment late in the third period, he will be there for that, especially in a playoff game. If you need him for potentially a clutch goal, if he can still do it, that would be huge as well. But yeah, I mean, he's a playoff style player. That's what he is. That's what he's always been. He's been a clutch player even before when he was, a member of, for example, the Vancouver Canucks earlier in his career. I kind of look at it as, I guess, a better version of Jeff Carter in the playoffs. Carter, when he came over to the Penguins, he was great in that 2021 series against the Islanders. I know the Penguins lost, but he was great. Showed that he was a clutch player. Last year against the Rangers, he played pretty well there too. I know they didn't make the playoffs this past year, and he's definitely trended down. But if you can get that kind of value in a series from Bonino, the Rangers will be doing A-okay, I think, in a series.
I would have to agree there. And, another question about him, and you kind of hit on this too, but, going by, everything what I know about Nick Bonino, not watching him all that closely since he's never been on the Rangers, but obviously I've seen him in the playoffs and whatnot. And one of the things that stands out is, he's a good defensive forward. Is he somebody that, say you're in a spot where, I don't know, there's a minute left and you're up by a goal. Do you want him on the ice, first of all, taking the face off, and then secondly, just playing defense, defending, trying to do everything that you can to hang on to that 1-goal lead in the final seconds there?
Yeah, again, even though he's not at 2016 level Nick Bonino or 2017 level Nick Bonino, he is still a player that you can put out there in a late game situation to win you faceoffs. He's still very good in the defensive zone. As we talked about, John, ranked in the 84th percentile for defensive impact at 5-on-5 this past season at someone who is 35. Peter Laviolette, he likes to lean on veterans throughout his career. Sometimes he's a little bit with younger players, but I'm sure, that can change at any point. But for someone who is big on veterans, I definitely think he's going to use Bonino in that role when the Rangers are up a goal with maybe a minute left, 25, 30, 35 seconds, any time during that final minute. I think he will definitely put him out there because, again, he's very good defensively. He can win you draws, good on the PK. So even though that's not a penalty kill situation, say 6-on-5 situation there, he can definitely get the job done. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny you mentioned Laviolette. Now that you say that, he just kind of seems like a Peter Laviolette type player.
Yes.
What he brings to the rink. It just feels like that is a good match there. And I mean, who knows? Drury obviously is the one making all the moves and everything, but I'd like to think that there's at least some communication there. And what do you think about Nick Bonino? And maybe Laviolette was on board with it. Who knows? Impossible to know everything that goes on behind the scenes. But one more Bonino question. And then Hunter, I figure we can turn our attention to just general fun Ranger Penguin offseason storylines and what we're excited about going into the season and all that fun stuff. But I'll let you go ahead and pick your favorite Bonino moment as a member of the Penguins. I'm gonna imagine it probably comes from that first run as opposed to this last run when he only played 3 games. But I figure it's got to either be Game 1 against the Sharks in the finals where he scored with 2 or 3 minutes left, whatever it was, to give them the lead, or, and I think you're going to go with this, eliminating the Capitals, in overtime. Game 6 in the second round in whatever year that was.
You would be correct. That winner against the Capitals in Game 6 of the second round in 2016 is my favorite Nick Bonino moment of all time. Remember, that game was absolutely crazy. The Penguins go out to a 3-0 lead. It looks like it's basically over heading into the third period, but then the Penguins take all these delay of game penalties. They look stunned heading into the locker room for overtime. The fans are nervous, but Bonino comes out there, ends it in OT, sends the Penguins to the Eastern Conference Final. I believe at that time I was 18 at the time. I was going to turn 19 that year. And this was towards the end of my senior year in high school. I grew up, well, most of my childhood life in Northern Virginia outside of Pittsburgh. And so I was surrounded by a lot of Washington Capitals fans. And all throughout the spring, you keep hearing, oh, we're still going to kick your butt, even though how good you were down the stretch, all that good stuff. But I was like, okay, we'll see. But when I went into school the next day, just wearing my jersey, just smiling at all the people who talk crap, it was the best, just seeing how mad they were. But just the moment overall, the goal call there was legendary. Same with the game one game winner with against the Sharks when Bonino scored with a few minutes left. That call was also amazing. But I do have to go with game 6 against the Capitals with how much it meant, with just so important to get the Penguins to the Stanley Cup. Yeah, I mean, and I know I was just speaking personally there with how much it meant for me just going in and talking a bunch of crap to Capitals fans, but it electrified this city in a way that we honestly haven't seen since that run, to be honest, overall.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's cool hearing those stories. I mean, obviously, listen, I mean, we're not fans of each other's teams. I think that's probably fair to say, but it is just cool hearing, hockey fans share their stories of, who they were with and how they reacted and how it impacted them when, this team, scored in overtime to, not to bring up bad memories, Hunter, but I actually did an episode last offseason where it's honestly the easiest episode I've ever done, because all I did was I asked the loyal listeners of Locked On Rangers to send me their stories of where they were and how they reacted when Panarin scored in overtime in Game 7. So I just sat there and read all those stories. You can check out that episode if you want to. I'm sure you want to. But no, it was a good time, man. But like I said, it really is cool to hear those stories. And yeah, you get a goal like that, you win a playoff series like that, and you don't forget, where you were and how you felt when it happened. And those moments, they're few and far between for a lot of teams. And obviously the Penguins, you've seen them win some Stanley Cups. So it's just cool to hear those stories for sure.
I mean, I was watching with my stepdad. He's a massive Capitals fan to this day too. And I remember when the goal was scored at that exact moment, I remember seeing him do this. He just face palmed right in front of me. And I started, my mom is the reason why, I grew up watching the Penguins, why I do this show. She's everything to me with how great she is. And we were just celebrating so much. And he was just there almost in tears. He was just absolutely beside himself.
Yeah, I was actually with my mom. She was visiting because my daughter had just been born. I'm trying to remember now. I guess that would have only been like a month. She was only a month or two old, but we're watching Game 7 together, Rangers and Penguins. And when that ended, like, I'd love to tell you I was like screaming and like yelling, dancing around. We both just kind of collapsed and just like hugged each other. That was all it was. Like, it wasn't years before that when the Rangers beat the Capitals in Game 7. That's when I went nuts and run around the whole house and everything.
Oh, yeah.
But this was just like, oh my God, it's over. That series needed to end. We talked about that, how the fans from both sides were at each other's throats, and just relief when it finally did end. And of course, it went into overtime.
Yeah, I mean, you know it. I know it. Both fan bases know it. That series was absolutely ridiculous on so many levels, and it really has just catapulted the rivalry very high. I would say right now, John, the Rangers might be the top rival of the Penguins, and it didn't used to be that way for several years. I would say the Capitals were up there along with the Flyers, but with how those rivalries have kind of gone downhill a little bit in recent years, I would say the Rangers have definitely taken that top spot, at least for right now, in my opinion.
I feel the same way. And then there's Ranger fans that are kind of old school, and they'll tell me, nah, man, it's always Rangers Islanders. Nothing will ever top that. And I'm like, look, I wasn't really around when the Islanders were winning all those Stanley Cups. So I don't see, like, for me, the Islanders, like, ever since I've been watching hockey, like, they're not really much of a threat. I know a couple of like Eastern Conference Finals appearances in somewhat recent history, but to me, man, it's Rangers Penguins. The Penguins have always been that team that, man, we got to find a way to beat these guys. How do we stop Crosby? How do we stop Malkin? How do we stop Letang? How do we get over the hump here? And yeah, man, it's just been a great rivalry over the past, however, I mean, if it's really reignited recently, but really the last 5, 10, 15 years, as far as you want to go back, it's been just great hockey for sure.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I know, again, the Flyers, the Capitals, the Islanders have always been a thorn in the Penguins' side. Every time something bad happens to the Penguins, it's usually because of the Islanders, though that rivalry, it's not as high as the Rangers. But again, right now, especially going into this season, those games are going to be must watch, those Pens-Rangers games.
I agree. I'm already looking forward to it and already getting excited just talking to you about this. But I figure we'll keep everything rolling in just a second. I do want to ask you, Hunter, about a couple of the Penguins offseason moves. I think maybe most notably the extension for Tristan Jarry, which was my understanding somewhat polarizing among Penguin fans. But we will get to that in just a second. All right, and so let's just go ahead and keep everything rolling here. Going to continue our discussion with Hunter Hodes of Locked On Penguins, a special crossover episode here, and just basically discuss the off seasons for both teams. And Hunter, obviously before this past season, Penguins show some loyalty. They keep Letang and Malkin, obviously the three cups there, while they've been members of the Penguins. And the other big move that they made this offseason is the extension of Tristan Jarry. And Jarry, he's been a good goalie for the Penguins, but he ends up getting 5 years, $5.375 million. And it feels to me, just going by social media, and you'll know this better than me, but it feels like Penguin fans in general, and maybe even you yourself, Hunter, a little bit, on the fence about this. He's a good goalie, but is he worth that much? Just kind of give me a feel for how you felt about that extension, if you could.
The biggest thing is it carries a lot of risk. 5 years for someone who has not been able to stay healthy these past couple of seasons. It's a big one. It's a big gamble to take, but you said it, John. When Jarry is healthy, I think he's one of the better goalies in the league. I personally think he's in that maybe 9 to 12 range of goalies when he's healthy, right fiddling on that top 10 range. He wasn't 921 for no reason just a couple of seasons ago. He was very good during that 2021-2022 season. Heck, John, I'll keep saying this. I know Rangers fans will probably hate it. I think if Tristan Jarry was healthy for that series, I think the Penguins win it. Yes, it's probably some copium for me. I get it. But I will continue to say that they probably win that series unless he just plays like he did against the Islanders, which, hey, that could happen. But I think he was on, what's the word I'm looking for here? Just a path to redeeming himself after that. But, Anders Lee ran into his leg, and the rest was history after that. He didn't play until Game 7 this year, battled numerous injuries. He says he's healthy now. He just has to go out and prove it. I think Kyle Dubas was getting a little bit nervous as the goalie started coming off the board in free agency. I don't really think he wanted to do a trade, even though there were quite a few good trade candidates out there, like someone like of the Melka. I wasn't too big on John Gibson, for example. I don't think his numbers are any good anymore, even though he plays on a bad team. But someone like of the Melka was good. You had Connor Hellebuck out there, UC Soros, but those were just big blockbuster additions that I don't really think they were going to do. But once you saw the goalie start to come off, I think Kyle was like, okay, I got to do something here. So he took the risk, signed Jarry, and we're going to see what he's made of throughout this contract. They are betting on him to stay healthy and to give them adequate goaltending. I'll keep saying it. If this team just gets average goaltending, I think they're a playoff team this season. And that's how it's been throughout the tenures of Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Chris Letang. Just get average goaltending, and the team should be fine. The big question will be who plays instead of Jarry during games. You still have Casey Smith on the team. They signed Alex Nedeljkovic. They signed a couple other goalies. It's going to be really, really interesting to see, what happens with that rotation when Jarry is not playing. But those are really my main thoughts on it overall.
Yeah, for sure. And, another free agent pickup for the Penguins. This is actually somebody going into free agency. I did a couple episodes where I'm spotlighting a couple of different players and, what do the Rangers need? Who can they afford? And a name that I came up with was actually Noel Acciari. Again, just kind of a gritty, a little bit like Bonino, just kind of a gritty defensive forward, somebody that, goes out there, plays every shift very hard. And the Penguins end up signing him 3 years at $2 million a pop. I would say even with Acciari, maybe some somewhat underrated, offensive skill as well. Not a superstar, but he'll get you some points. And I thought he would have been a great fit for the Rangers, but he ends up going to the Penguins. How do you feel about that signing, Noel Acciari to the Penguins?
I think he's going to give them like a Brandon Tanev type game for each game this upcoming season. If I said that weird, I apologize. But I think he's going to be more of that Tanev replacement that McGinn was not when he was a Penguin. And just because, he's a very physical player, he'll definitely lay the body, but he's also very good defensively, ranked in the 90th percentile 5-on-5 this past season when it comes to defensive impacts. Also very good on the PK, ranked in the 87th percentile. It's funny, John, you can ask me that same question about Matt Nieto and Lars Eller, and I would have the same question. I would have the same answer I would have for you right now about them, except that I don't think they're going to be Brandon Tanev type replacements. I think Acciari is going to, because he's just going to be a lot of fun to watch. He can lay the boom, good defensively. I think of those three, he will give the Penguins the most offense. I'm actually more bullish on him, maybe 12, 13, maybe upwards of 14 goals with Nieto and Eller. I think it's going to be a bit less than that. But with Acciari, I like the fit. He can play, either wing spot. He can play center if you need him to. But honestly, the theme for all of the bottom six signings for the Penguins was just getting better defensively in their own zone, because the Penguins were horrendous in their own zone this past season. The bottom six in general was an absolute tire fire. When the top six was on the ice, they were A, not scoring, and B, letting in a lot of goals in their net. I understand the plan. It's a bit risky because the top six is going to have to be really healthy. But if the bottom six can just pull their weight and not allow as many goals as last year's unit did, I'm going to be, I think, a bit more bullish on the team heading into this season than I originally was, maybe on July 1, where I was like, I'm not really, don't think it's going to move the needle that much. But hey, there's still a little bit of time where it's the first or second day of August here. There's still a little bit of time heading into training camp. But overall, I do like the Achari signing. And I think of the players that Kyle Dubas brought in to help out the forward group, I think he's going to be the best one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just kind of looking at everything the Penguins have done between trades and free agency and whatnot. And, I figure, Hunter, we can pretty much call it there. I mean, it's been fun as always doing this this crossover edition.
I was going to ask you, John, what do you think of all the Rangers moves this offseason? They bring in Nick Bonino, Tyler Pitlick, Blake Wheeler. That was the big one coming over from Winnipeg after they bought him out. Jonathan Quick is the new backup to Shesterkin. How bullish are you on the Rangers heading into the year?
No, I feel good. I mean, you got the core back in place. They didn't lose anybody I mean, of course you lost the rentals, but you knew that was going to happen. You knew Tarasenko in all likelihood wasn't going to be back. Tyler Mott is still out there, although at this point seems like he might be playing somewhere else next season. And Patrick Kane, I mean, I don't expect him to sign with anybody anytime soon. As far as, what they did in free agency, yeah, overall, I thought it was good. I mean, you got to grade on a little bit of a curve because, they didn't have a ton of cap space. There's not a whole lot of maneuverability. So you're looking at a situation where, you'll sign a sixth defenseman. They did that with Eric Gustafsson, who I think that's, a solid signing for your sixth defenseman. You need a new backup goalie. You get a legend in Jonathan Quick. I realize he's not prime Jonathan Quick, but I think, him being in a clear-cut backup role could be good for him. And also, the Rangers have a goalie coach who's been there forever, Benoit Allaire. And obviously, his two most notable success stories are clearly Lundqvist and Shesterkin. But even guys like Ranta and like Cam Talbot when he was there, and, Yaroslav Halak had a nice season last year as the backup. All these guys pretty much swear by him. It seems like they always benefit from working with him. And look, Jonathan Quick obviously knows his stuff, but I'm interested to see what happens here, because now this goalie coach, this goalie guru, has a situation where, it's kind of a reclamation project. He's not helping somebody early in his career. He's trying to get somebody somewhat back on track. And I think Quick with less wear and tear could be a good backup. And the big one for me was Blake Wheeler. And, quick story, Hunter. So I'm doing a live show for the start of NHL free agency. I'm thinking this could be fun, and that was the day, if you remember, that Twitter was all wonky and nothing was working right. And you're over your tweet limit or whatever that was, and nothing's loading. And I'm like trying to watch NHL Network and look at social media, and people in the chat are telling me, oh, we got Blake Wheeler. And I'm like, wow, because I didn't think the Rangers could afford him. I like the fit, but I didn't think they could afford him. And people are telling me Blake Wheeler for $800K. And I'm like, you guys better not be messing with me, And I realized, Wheeler, not in his prime anymore. He's going to be 37 before the season starts. But to get somebody like that at a position right wing, which is probably your biggest weakness, and to get him at just a shade over the league minimum, I mean, I get that he's older again, but I don't see how anyone can be upset about that. He, even last year, in what was, one of his not great seasons compared to what he did early in his career, he ended up with like 53 or 55 points. It was a solid season. And now to play in the middle six on the Rangers, I think it's a good landing spot for him. And I think the Rangers are going to benefit from having him in the fold next season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he can skate as well anymore. That's for sure. I think that's part of his game has definitely gone down a little bit, but I think he'll still be good for at least 15, 17 goals, probably more than that at this point. And maybe he even scores 20 to 22 goals in a third line role, but curious to see how that goes. But I mean, I still have the Rangers as a playoff team heading into this season. I don't think they're just going to fall off pretty hard or anything like that. I'm curious to see, because I have the top two teams in the Metro as Carolina and New Jersey. That's just me personally. But after that, I have the Rangers, then the Penguins and Islanders, obviously. I think those spots, those 3 to 5 spots in general, are going to be highly contested this upcoming season in general.
Yeah, the Metro is always crazy. And right when you think you know what's going to happen next, or this team is on the rise, or this team isn't any good at all, the whole thing gets flipped around. I mean, I know the Canes they've won it the last couple of years in a row, and obviously the Penguins for so many years were in the playoffs, and they could be back in the mix. And the Rangers and Devils have really reemerged the last couple of seasons here. It's crazy, man. And who's to say what's going to happen this upcoming season? Maybe the Blue Jackets surprise everybody, and they're right in the. You never know. You never know, right? So. It's definitely it's a fun division to watch. And honestly, man, you put any two of those teams in that division together and put them on the rink together, and you're going to be entertained more often than not.
I agree. I think it's, in my opinion, the most competitive division heading into the season. I could see right now 6 teams out of there being in a playoff spot, or just potentially making the playoffs. Not being in a playoff spot, obviously, since the max can be 5-3 at least from the 2 divisions. But I could see as many as 6 being involved in getting a playoff spot. And heck, you're right, John. Maybe the Blue Jackets make it 7, because I think the Flyers are probably going to be the worst team in that division this upcoming season with their rebuild. But the Jackets, hey, maybe they do surprise us, and Johnny Gaudreau goes off, and the additions they made, the draft they had. I'll be curious to see how they do, especially also with Mike Babcock as their head coach now.
Yeah, you just never know. I mean, there's always a couple of surprises and a couple of disappointments every season, and man, I just can't wait. It was great talking hockey with you here, Hunter, and I don't know about you, man, but I'm just so excited for this upcoming season. Obviously, neither one of our teams ended up where they wanted to be this past year. And I think in a lot of ways, whether it's you and me or just fans of the team in general, I think that makes you look forward to the next season just that much more. And I think I can speak for both of us when I say we are definitely looking forward to this next season.
These 2 months can't go by soon enough, I think, is how I want to end this show. It's that August, we are truly now in the dog days of summer. The arbitration's finishing up. You're not going to see many trades, maybe outside of, I don't know, Connor Hellebuck, Noah Hannafin. They have the whole Erik Karlsson situation to deal with at some point. But there's just not a lot of action right now, and the league likes it that way. So hopefully these next 2 months speed by pretty quick.
I'm with you there. And listen, Ranger fans, Penguin fans, thank you guys as always for tuning in. And Hunter, man, if you want to do this during the regular season, we got some matchups. We'll do a pregame show here, a postgame show there, whatever you want to do. I'm up for it as long as you are.
Yeah, that sounds good. And Pat will be there for this one. He had a work thing come up, my new co-host Patrick Damp, but he will be back for the next episode on Friday and moving forward. But we will definitely have a new face for those crossovers as well.
Looking forward to that. Looking forward to meeting Pat and talking hockey with both of you guys. So, once again, Ranger fans, Penguin fans, thank you as always for tuning in. And we will see you guys next time.